My initial reaction to that is that's double city. If you're purely relying on accessing the hand by squatting takes more time to do than you to just change the orientation of your hands. In fact, what the basis of the technique he's showing here, I actually personally really like to do. G'day mates, Nate the Aussie here. How you all doing? Thank you so much for your patience while you're waiting for me to upload videos. It's been quite hard to find time to do it. In case you're wondering why that is, you should check out my most recent short that explains all the reason for that. I finally have some time to do a little bit of filming today, and I was going to continue on my next Fencing Basics episode, but then this happened. Nope. So there's this newer channel that has been uploading some new content called Ghost of the Dojo, I believe. Now, it is really, really cool to be seeing people doing historical Asian martial arts in general, specifically in the realms of steel sparring and actually getting into that stuff. It's awesome to see people doing that, and it's great to see more and more people getting into that. Ghost of the Dojo, if you are seeing this, I'm really glad to see people finally doing this and getting this stuff out there. So whatever points of agreement or disagreement I have from the video, just want to let you know, love the work that you're doing. So he recently uploaded a video looking at Age Uchi, which is basically an upwards cut in the realms of Japanese sword arts. Now, I'm not going to be looking at this necessarily only from a historical perspective, just in terms of when we're looking at the name, because we can't really document the name Age Uchi, specifically in the period that I'm looking at, which is pre-16th century or the very beginning of the 17th century. So instead of that, we're going to be looking at this mostly from a practical martial arts perspective through the realms of sparring. But enough about me, let's get to it.
Today's move of the day is known as the Age Uchi, or upward cut. This was actually recently covered in a tutorial by Ludus Ferocia. Hopefully I got that name correct. The way that this is launched is squat while performing a J cut with the sword. So from the standard grip, it was demonstrated that you squat down.
Okay, so in this position, now he may sort of add more detail to this later, so obviously just take this with a grain of salt. My initial reaction to that is that's double city. If you do that in the way that it's being shown here, about 8 to 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, you're going to get a double hit. You're in your opponent's measure, you're not doing anything to occupy their sword, and you're going for a first intention strike on their hands. If you go first intention, they go first intention, it's going to be a double, and that's the worst. That's sort of possible worst case scenario. If you want to learn about intentions and so on, there's a video that I made in the description. Check it out. However, he may add a caveat to this, so let's keep watching and see what he says.
Accessible. When approaching this technique, you also have to look at the different entries and the risks that are exposed when doing so. So,
right,
when
there
you
you go.
immediately attack, you can even see without my opponent even attacking me, my head is already exposed.
Yes.
As a risk, right?
Very much so. The other thing as well I wanted to add is that if you're purely relying on accessing the hand by squatting takes more time to do than you to just change the orientation of your hands. It's just quicker because you're basically moving your entire body either up or down versus your hands just doing this movement. It's just going to be quicker with the hands than it is by squatting the body. The reason why I'm not a big fan of squatting the body quite often is because, one, it's a slower movement than moving with the hands, and two, squatting the body sinks your weight and also makes it harder for you to be able to move from that position, particularly if your weight is equal on both legs and you've squatted down into yourself.
Now, it's possible to get your body just low enough and get your sword just fast enough so that you can avoid your opponent's blade, but I would prefer not to expose myself to such risks. I would do so by a couple of ways. I could use a feint, which now from this stance, either or, I can go and use my first intent, direct cut. This from the outside is going to force him to react. You can sell him on this attack from the outside, right? Now he moves to go and block my sword. So now, when you go and you launch your attack, you can feint.
Okay, so the way he's showing it here, is sort of probably not the way I would prefer to do it, at least the way he's showing it. He may correct this later, so obviously I don't want to make any final judgments now. Something that we're showing here, so we're going in for an upward strike and then feinting lower while continuing our forward momentum. Now, if you notice, he's ended in a place where his opponent can still very much hit him from this regard. All the opponent would need to do is then change basically the orientation of his blade ever so slightly, and then he would hit Ghost here. There's a way that I prefer to do this, contrary to what's being shown here, but again, he may sort of add further information to this, so let's keep watching.
And use that motion against him. That's the first option. Now, there's also a chance you either move a little bit too ahead of him, or he doesn't bite on your fake, in which he's going to directly attack.
Yes, that can happen.
And see right through it, and that's the possibility, right? When you use
Which is the other reason why you don't just keep stepping forward.
Now, the next is what I like to call feeling, or yaiba no kanji. Feeling.
Not sure if that's a historical term, but
this is known as Feling.
Fühlen.
So now, my first intent is...
So Fühlen, in German longsword, is the idea of basically you're in a bind, your opponent's pushing, you give way to where they're pushing, but you still cover their weapon. So basically, you're pushing them they're pushing you this way, right? And they push you, you basically slide off their blade and then strike at an opening. Is basically what Fühlen means. It's the idea of interacting in the bind.
Cut directly at my opponent, downward, so I have power of the bind on my side. I attack right in the middle, and now he's forced to react. There's tension on the blade that he is prisoner to, because if he doesn't meet back with this tension, I'm going to cut him, right? So now, I'm going to use this moment against him, feel him pushing on that blade, and now it's a question of who leaves first, and whoever leaves first leaves on their turn.
That's true.
Because right as he's
In most
pushing
cases,
on my
yeah.
blade, I will leave while his blade keeps going the other way. Alright? So, once again, from the outside, we're going to go, I'm going to cut at him, he's going to have to defend my cut. I'm going to feel pressure from his blade, and I'm going to attack his wrist.
So he seems to do this interesting thing where he'll cut and he'll just stay stationary while he cuts, or he will do a cross step with the front foot crossing across, well, basically going across himself. In that situation, I personally would not recommend it, mainly because if you cross step and you're within grappling range and you get grappled, you're going to get toppled over very, very quickly, because if one foot crosses in front of the other, you're immediately unstable in that regard. There are fencing systems that use cross steps, most definitely. It's never a situation where you should never cross your feet at all by any means, but if you're doing it particularly in grappling distance, you're going to leave yourself vulnerable to being toppled over. Another thing as well is it makes sense to step off the line while you then do that cut. In fact, the basis of the technique he's showing here, I actually personally really like to do as well, particularly if I'm going for sort of whether a thrust or a strike, my opponent tries to go into a high bind like what he was showing before, but just before they get to the crux of the high bind, I just immediately leave and then cut underneath. That is something that I personally like to do, and I know it works. I've done it in sparring. The thing that I would do though is I tend to leave the bind before I get that close. At the range that he's doing it here, I personally would just go for a grapple at that point if you're that close, because if you give way to that and try and cut underneath, you can do it, but the problem is that as soon as you leave the opponent's weapon, their weapon is no longer occupied, and then they can do stuff from there as well. So it's possible to do it, it's just riskier in that regard, in my opinion. But the base of the technique, yeah, I really like.
Out of all of the attempts that I've utilized this technique in sparring, I would say that this method, through the feeling, is the safest, highest percentage way to execute this technique.
Okay, so you see right here, the way he did this technique was different to the way he showed in the demonstration. And there's a reason why this worked. I'll go back just a little bit and I'll play it in slow motion. Let's have a look.
Execute this technique.
Yeah, so see the distance he went here? It's still kind of vulnerable for him. You see how close his opponent's weapon is to his hand? So it's still a little bit risky, but he does not enter into a high bind that is anywhere near as close as he was in the demo. He basically goes in and then just cuts up underneath, cuts the wrist, makes sense, and he does it while keeping at a relatively safe distance. Still at risk, but a lot less at risk than he did with the previous, with the demonstration in the drill. I get that he's showing the same concept, and obviously, if you show a concept in a drill, and when that concept's being shown in various different other contexts, of course it's not going to look 100% the same, and I'll totally grant that grain of salt there, for sure. But I do think that there is a difference between the one that you're showing in the drill and the one that's being shown here, particularly in terms of application. The idea of yes, go for a strike then underneath, that's the same, but the actual application, particularly when talking about range, is quite different. And I think that's probably something worth mentioning here too, I'd think. Anyway, let's keep watching. So he almost gets hit there, it looks like. I mean, look, maybe it's the angle of the camera, and look, if that's the case, then feel free to ignore what I'm saying. But if I go back here, it looks like he nearly gets hit there. Now, the way he steps off the line by using the back foot, I personally prefer to do that. So the footwork he's doing there, I also prefer to do as well, rather than cross-stepping the front foot, because then if they go to grapple, I have a much stronger base. But the way it's being done here and at that range, that is very nearly a double. I actually think it might have been, to be honest. But yeah, we'll keep going. We'll keep watching. Yeah. See, the way I see it here, and again, it could be the camera angle, but from what I'm seeing, if the longsword fencer, who, if they continued to cut down on that cut that they were doing, they would have hit. They basically would have hit Ghost here. The only reason why the longsworder didn't hit Ghost in this video, at least from what I'm seeing, is based on the fact that he stopped the strike as soon as Ghost's sword hit his hand. But in reality, we know for a fact, physics, if an object has been set in motion, it'll continue on that motion, even if the source of that motion has been hit. Sure, the rest of that motion might not be very controlled, but it's still going to continue on that trajectory. So if I go back a little bit and just play that, right, and I'll pause, yeah, here. So he hit his hands, and then the longsworder just stopped. In reality, that most likely wouldn't happen. The sword will continue on, and it would still hit. Now, something I'd like to know, Ghost, and this is just a question for you based on the way you fence, and this is just a genuine curious question, because obviously no one fences the same, everyone fences differently. I'd love to know why you turn your back a little bit here. Is there a reason why you turn? Is that purely just to draw the cut, so you're not drawing with your hands, you're drawing with your body? Is that the reason why? Just because for me personally, I usually try not to turn my back as much as I can, just because I kind of feel a bit vulnerable. But then again, that's just a me thing. Do you have a reason why you do that in terms of fencing and sparring? I'd be curious to know. Yeah, again, it almost looks like a double there. See, and this is why I don't like, at least for me, I personally prefer not going for a feint. When I'm going down and then feinting down and then cutting up again, I don't like to continue forward momentum, because when I finish the cut, I'm still very much in my opponent's measure when I'm in there, especially if I continue on my forward momentum. So if we just keep watching, if I watch the Messer clip again, yeah, So what I would prefer to do is I would go in with the cut for the feint, and as they react, I would then step offline away from their blade and then cut up. Because, to be fair, and again, this could be camera angling, but it looks very close when you're hitting the hands. And you don't need to be that close when you're hitting the hands, unless you're then going to follow that up with a grapple. But that's a different scenario. So, at least from my reaction to this, I love the idea of feinting and then coming up. We see it attested to in the manuals quite often, but it's something that I think, personally for me, I prefer to do it by feinting and then cutting up while stepping offline again, so that way when I deliver my cut, I'm in a much safer area.
If you have any other method or any entry that you believe is higher percentage, please do let me know, stitch this video and respond. I would love to see it. Otherwise, in the meantime,
I love what you're doing here, Ghost. I love what you're doing here when you're basically saying, hey guys, look, this is my experience based on sparring. This is what I feel works best. Do you have any ideas that work best for you? If so, share them. I love the fact that you're doing that, and I think people need to do that more often. I love to see that you're championing that on your channel, because this is how people improve, right? This is how we improve the community, and we get people more interested in looking into how they can improve their fencing from a technical perspective. And it sort of sets the premise in a really good way. I think there are too many people out there, in whether it's HEMA, historical Japanese martial arts, HKMA, HAMA, where they tend to get very fixed on, this is the best way because I find it works in sparring. I think it's always good to leave room for the fact that, look, maybe someone has developed a better interpretation than you, and if so, it'd be great to learn from them. So I love the fact that you're doing this, Ghost, and in general, whatever points of agreement or disagreement I've made in this video, please keep doing what you're doing, because I think it's great that someone like you is putting this stuff out there, so please keep it up. Nice. And look, hey, please subscribe to his channel if you're interested in anything to do with historical Japanese martial arts, particularly when you're looking at steel sparring, and you're wanting to sort of get a bit more of a practical side to your fencing with historical Japanese weapons. Definitely subscribe to him. It looks like he's a very genuine guy. He wants to get this stuff out there. He wants to improve, and he wants to foster this passion. So if you are keen on that kind of stuff, definitely like and definitely subscribe to him as well. And Ghost, for you, mate, I know it seems like you're based in the US, so we probably won't be able to communicate face-to-face or collaborate face-to-face or spar or anything like that, unfortunately. But look, man, if you wanted to reach out and everything, and we could probably work together on a couple of things to do with fencing or anything like that, or just reach out and we can just chat about fencing, feel free, man. Just contact me with an email through YouTube or anything like that. And again, please keep doing what you're doing. All right, cheers, mates. That's it for this reaction video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, everyone, for your patience while you're waiting for me for uploads. I really do appreciate that. And as always, I'll see you, mates, in the next video. Bye-bye.